In a dark world filled with deceit, one united voice is crying out. Revealing the truth of God's Word. It's time to expose the hidden truth and unravel the lies. While we're living beyond Satan's little season. With Sister Crystal and Brother Phil.
Welcome to Living Beyond Satan's Little Season show. We're your hosts,
Sister Crystal,
Brother Phil. The topic today, virginity, a neglected discipline. This is going to be the first of our neglected discipline shows. We're going to do a series on neglected disciplines in the Bible. So what we're trying to do here is get the biblical perspective on why virginity is so important. And it's a neglected discipline in our society and, more importantly, in our churches, which is really what I see as a sad part.
Well, I think we have to really address why this is no longer adhered to in our society. Why so many people have abandoned and excused that character, that choice decision to keep themselves pure, not important anymore. It's really sad because it has totally shown through the years of decay in our society that very few people have saved themselves for marriage, and I've seen that as being an important thing for their future. The choices you make are led to other things, and if you're serious about those choices, your future will have huge blessings or huge consequences for what you do, and it's sad that this has gone to the wayside.
Well, we're not teaching that in our churches anymore. The importance of women and men before they get married to stay basically virgins. And I'm really going to focus our show today for the virginity of the women. Now, men should be pure in all the ways. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but the Bible actually speaks of the female, the women.
Right.
Basically, that's one of the prerequisites of getting married is to be a virgin. And we're going to show you that virgin is the one that the men are to take. They're the ones that got the highest bride price, actually.
Right. Well, see, what we're trying to show and share what the Bible teaches is there's a high standard, a more of a godly standard, you could say, that we should all aim and attain and encourage younger people, our children, grandchildren, whatnot, to try to aim for purity and being virgins for their wedding day, because so often we've dismissed it as it's okay. It's a kind of a rite of passage for people to kind of go and have fun and be promiscuous, but there are so many other serious consequences to that decision making when it's not taken seriously.
Well, in Western society, which is what most of us that are listening to the show live in, we're down to, on the wedding day, 1 out of every 30 women now are virgins on their wedding night. It's gotten down to 1 in 30. Okay, that's not a good statistic there. What we need to do is reverse that, and the only way we're going to reverse that is to expose the biblical teachings and what it actually teaches about this topic. We're going to start in the Old Testament law of Moses, okay? And then we're going to move on through into the New Testament. When I did the study on virginity in the Bible, I found some really interesting insights and that I didn't know about. When you do these word studies, you discover, boy, I didn't know about this or that, and this is why we're doing the show now. Okay, so let's start here in Exodus chapter 22. Remember, this is right after the 10 Commandments.
Right.
Remember, that's Exodus 20. A couple chapters later, he talks about how to treat women and relationships. We've gotten so far away from the biblical standard than what is taught actually in the law of Moses, and then later on reiterated in our New Testaments under the New Testament writers. So what's being taught in the Old Testament about virginity is as valid as it is in the New Testament in our day and age as well. It's just our churches don't ever teach that because so many people have fallen down on that. Nobody wants to offend anybody. But you know me, I don't care about offending anybody. I mean, I'm not trying to offend people, but I don't care about, I don't want to step on people's toes or anything. I don't know you. I don't know anybody I'm talking to here. I'm just telling you what the Bible says, and you can take that for what it is. So let's go ahead and start in Exodus chapter 22. Let's start with verse 16. Go ahead.
And if anyone deceive a virgin that is not betrothed, and lie with her, he shall surely endow her for a wife to himself. And if her father positively refuses and will not consent to give her to him for a wife, he shall pay compensation to her father according to the amount of the dowry of virgins.
A lot of times we don't understand all this because our society, relationships have nothing to do with virginity anymore and everything. But here this woman was deceived, this virgin girl apparently here in this scenario, was deceived. She wasn't betrothed. Okay, so that means she wasn't promised to another man. She was, I guess, what today we would describe this as being a single woman. Okay.
Well, she was enticed, it sounds like.
And, obviously she was deceived into a sexual relationship with this man. Okay, this is what kind of happened here, okay? Men, because men, they're smooth talkers and they can kind of talk women into all kinds of stuff. This is what happened. But you notice here that the father of this woman had the right to either say, no, you can't have her as wife, or yes, you can have her as wife.
Right.
He had the control of her future relationship with a man. Believe it or not. This is unbelievable because today's day and age, nobody thinks this way. This is how far we've come. See, the fathers have control over the daughters, who they end up with. No, I'm not saying marriage here. Don't get me wrong. This isn't marriage. This is given to the man as wife.
Right.
Different than marriage. Okay? There's two kinds of relationships that we're going to learn about today. There's marriage relationships where you actually have a wedding. And then other times, the Bible just mentions somebody took somebody as a wife, and there's no wedding involved. But that's also a legitimate relationship as well, biblically. And here's an example that he wanted to take her as wife, but see, because he didn't get permission from the father, he had to pay the full compensation of the bride price or the dowry to the father, which was essentially like 50 shekels of silver.
Well, did it say that he wanted to lie with her, or he already did lie with her?
I think he already did. He wanted her as he didn't go through the father first. See, the father owns, essentially in biblical times, in the Bible teaches the father owns the virginity of his daughters.
Right. Well, if you think about it, the father is the father of the children, so it's his seed that enabled that child to be born. And most likely you can look at it, if it's a woman, I mean, boys too belong to the father, but especially women are their ownership of their father. It's kind of a form of protection.
I'm not trying to put anybody down because our society is completely different.
Yes.
If a man entices a woman who's a virgin and takes her virginity, he's essentially stolen
right.
from her father, unless he asked her father's permission to do that. This is the biblical way of how things worked. The father had the exclusive rights to the woman's virginity here, and it was taken by this man. And so the father could either say, okay, you could take her as wife, but you got to pay me the full amount because you took her without permission.
Right.
And of course, here he had to give full compensation, which was essentially 50 shekels of silver. Now, how much is that? That's about 50 days' wages or so.
Right.
So essentially, almost 2 months of wages go towards the father to get the woman. That's kind of it's transactional. See, relationships between a man and a woman in biblical times is transactional. It wasn't a kind of a vow thing. It was a transaction between the man and the father of the bride and the woman.
Well, yeah, and sometimes in some actually other cultures, it's between the two fathers of the two young people. It could be, a father's hashing out a deal between their children. But in most cases, and even today, a rarity, the young man will go to the father and ask for her hand.
In marriage, it used to be
Kind
that
of a
was a
traditional
common thing, but now it's become like, I'm just going to take what I want, and then the father's been essentially nixed out.
Well, and it's not
like.
so much that the father has been nixed out. What's happened in our society is that feminism has empowered women to make that decision on their own, thus eliminating the father and eliminating the protection that they actually receive when the father is in that relationship.
It's very interesting stuff, I think.
It really is.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. It's a totally different way of thinking. So what we need to do is I'm trying to get us all back to the biblical standard. Now, the next passage we're going to go into is some laws over the priests, especially, the priests of God, the ones that worked with the holy things. Now, in the New Testament, every New Testament believer is a priest, right? So that's what I'm saying. So this applies to us today because we're priests here. Because remember, Jesus is the high priest in our covenant,
right?
And we are priests of God. It's a priesthood of all believers. Interesting thing that brings up about who priests could marry. They were the religious leaders of their day. They had a higher standard than just the common folk. Just like today, us being the priests of God, and of course we have a high priest, which is Christ. We also are set to a higher standard, just like the priests were in biblical days, especially when we look at Leviticus here. So let's go in Leviticus chapter 21. We'll start with verse 13 and following. Go ahead and read that one.
He shall take for a wife a virgin of his own tribe, but a widow or one that is put away or profaned or a harlot, these he shall not take. But he shall take for a wife a virgin of his own people, and he shall not profane his seed among his people. I am the Lord that sanctifies him.
Okay, so specifically, the priests were not allowed to take anybody as wife who were, and he gives a little list here. Even a widow, even though the Bible allows widows, of course, to take his wife, but no, not even widows were allowed for the priests because they had to be, only a virgin was allowed here, okay? Widow or one that is put away, that's one who's divorced, a divorced woman, or they could become wife to others, just not the priest here. Or profaned, or a harlot, again, somebody involved with harlotry, a promiscuous. And today, most women who get married are essentially unpaid harlots. I hate to say that, but if you've not kept yourself for marriage, then you're essentially known as a harlot because you didn't wait for the biblical way of, saving yourself for marriage. So you would be considered to be a harlot, even though you were not maybe paid for it. You were an unpaid harlot. I'm sorry that, maybe that offends people. Well, I'm not trying to, but that's kind of the way, how it's described here.
Well, it's all about choices. And I hate to say, a lot of people may or may not have had the opportunity to know or be encouraged to live a pure lifestyle. Because some girls don't have dads or don't have a godly figure or leadership or someone to protect them. So it's a standard that we should be living by, but not everyone has those qualifications of people in their life.
I think a lot of it has to do with people are not taught the importance of this. This is why we're doing this show, honestly. Because people just think, it's no big deal. Our virginity is not a big deal. Because that's what our society says. But what I'm saying is the Bible says it is a huge deal. And what I want us to get back is to get back to the biblical standard to where we save ourselves for our husbands and we save ourselves for our wives, and this is what I'm really trying to get back to.
I also want to speak to any fathers or brothers or any other men in households. We should be watching out for these young women because just like in the earlier passage, there are men trying to take advantage of women, and this is what it boils down to. If you have a high self-esteem, a high value of what you think of yourself and what others and how others should think of you, you will not sell yourself short. And that's what a lot of young women do. They feel like they need to find affection or get affection from someone else because they're missing it in their life with their fathers or some male figure in their life. They don't have that. And so they look for that in other men. And that is not a satisfying type of love. Honestly, the only other satisfying type of love that you can get outside of the loving relationship of a father and protecting his daughter would be through God and having a loving relationship with God and trusting him to help you make good decisions. But we need to get back to not just women keeping themselves pure or men, but fathers and parents encouraging these young people to make better choices. Because that's really where it starts. I know back when I was a young teenager, there were people encouraging the young people around me and that worked in the youth groups and whatever to stay pure. There was a movement of purity, chasteness, and that was widely spoken, I would say. I heard it a few times. But nowadays, even in the church, do you even hear of anyone going, oh, let's talk about, abstinence and sexual purity before marriage? You don't hear that very often.
Again, let's go back here to this passage here, because he says, but you shall take a wife, a virgin of your own people. That's exactly what's taught in the New Testament as well. Virgins of what? Believers. Remember, we're not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers in the New Testament, so we're not to take a wife, the men aren't, of those who are not yoked together as a believer. So the believers have to take other believers as wives, just like he was saying of his own people, they have to take a wife of his own people as well. Deuteronomy 22 verse 13 has a scenario where a woman who's a virgin, a man takes her as wife. And what happens is he finds he doesn't have proof of her virginity. This is how important virginity was. If he felt like he was shafted out of a virgin woman, he was going to basically put charges against her that she was not a virgin when they married. This is kind of unbelievable because today, this wouldn't really fly. But you see, if proof of her virginity was found, then he wasn't allowed to divorce her. But if it's true that she wasn't a virgin when he had paid the bride price for virgins. See, it all's transactional, you see. The virgin's got the highest amount of money. And so what happens is the father, thinking his daughter was a virgin, and what he does is he goes and he demands the 50 shekels of silver for his daughter's virginity. The man gets her and said, well, she's not a virgin, so I paid you 50 shekels of silver. But see, what happens is that the daughter must have lied to her father that she kept her virginity, and she didn't. So here the man, if it's caught that she wasn't a virgin, she was essentially to be stoned to death. And it's not because she wasn't a virgin. It's because of the deception involved and the lying involved with her saying that she was a virgin, the father demanding the price of virginity, and her not being a virgin.
Well, it's the same today when someone doesn't follow through with providing something they were supposed to provide in the accuracy they were supposed to provide it. A service or selling someone something and they didn't sell it to the standards they thought they were buying it for. It's kind of like that. It's kind of a transactional thing. But there again, are you a person of your word? Are you trying to deceive and defraud someone, or you don't care?
So essentially, on this scenario, you can read the story for yourself in Deuteronomy chapter 22. It's really interesting what happens. Anyway, if the woman is a virgin, then basically the man is not allowed to ever divorce her. He tried to put shame upon a virgin of Israel, which is the highest honor to have, in their society. Now, women who weren't virgins, who were involved with harlotry, like Rahab, the prostitute,
right?
She became another man's wife as well. So there wasn't any stigmatism that, hey, if you played the harlot, you couldn't have a sexual relationship anymore. It just that this woman was deceiving her husband that she was giving him her virginity, and she wasn't.
So in this transaction, he paid a hefty price because he thought he was getting someone of high value.
He thought he was getting new, and turns out he was getting used.
Right.
That's essentially what happens, okay? He bought new, but he was getting used.
He paid new, but he got used.
So here's the interesting thing I want to read about in this last couple verses of this thing. What happens to the woman is, then they shall bring out the young woman to the doors of her father's house. This is if she's guilty of not keeping her virginity. She was to go to the doors of her father's house. Now, I want you to picture this in your mind really quick. Imagine, okay, this is the house that she grew up in. This is the house and everything that she, she was raised in and all that kind of stuff. And what does it say about her? They shall stone her to death. What I want you to see is the reason behind the stoning. The reason given of why she was stoned to death. And believe it or not, it wasn't the fact that she lied about her virginity. Is not the reason why she was stoned to death. The reason why she was stoned to death, we get on the very last verse here, in verse 21. It says, because what? She brought folly. Okay, so go ahead and brought folly.
She brought folly among the children of Israel, to defile the house of her father by harlotry, so you shall remove the evil one from among you.
So again, the reason for it is because she was guilty of bringing harlotry into her father's house. I'm trying to get us to understand the significance of this. This was a death sentence. I don't want to put anybody down for failing at this, but I'm trying to get people to see the significance that this is a sin worthy of death, according to God. This is not my own opinion. This is God's opinion here. She was guilty of, I guess, unpaid or paid harlotry. It doesn't matter. She was guilty of fornication in her father's house. So that's why she was stoned at the door of her father's house. Can you imagine being that father that got his daughter stoned right in front of her door?
Door. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, see, this is to send a message to every father out there. You know, you protect your daughter's virginity, or otherwise this is going to happen to your daughter. And I'm sure it was really shameful too.
Well, I know that we don't have a lot of biblical ramifications for consequences in our society. I mean, we've kind of taken God's word and kind of thrown it out to the wind in the way that people live. If you call yourself a believer, if you want to, or you're seriously wanting to follow God's word and seriously wanting to do things the right way, I believe, because God's way is the right way and the only way to live, then we need to bring back the concept of men and women. I say that, together, but especially women need to be pure when they get married and need to have the desire to want to be pure, to be able to give that gift of serious purity to the person they're going to marry. Because I really think it goes a long way in the relationship of the husband and wife relationship and the future togetherness of raising children, being honest, being open. If you are kind of phony or deceptive before you get married or before you enter into a serious committed relationship, as marriage is, then you should seriously be truthful and open about everything that you're doing or have done. And the society we live in, it's all about deception. Truth be told, purity hasn't gone to the wayside. It's just the way society looks at it, as if it's a bad thing. And it's not, because what society does is whatever society thinks is bad, God says is good. It's always an opposite kind of thing. And we need to get back to what God says is good by being pure.
This fornication that this woman did actually defiled the house of her father.
Right.
Okay, in other words, what I'm trying to say is fornication in this way defiles the land, defiles actual property. And what I'm trying to state is we need to get back to the biblical standards so we can stop defiling the land, defiling the property that we're in. And it does something to the property, to the land, and everything else, okay? And we're going to go over one more today, and we're going to have a part two because we've gone so long on this, but we're going to go into one more in the Old Testament, and then next time we'll go to the New Testament passage to talk about this. We're going to go again to Deuteronomy chapter 22. Now, this one's interesting. Sometimes when we read things in the Bible, we don't understand what they are actually saying, but if you study them out, you'll see, okay, I kind of understand what that means now. And if you understand how women are given in marriage by the father, etc., this all kind of makes sense now, okay? So let's go ahead and read Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 28 and 29.
And if anyone should find a young virgin who has not been betrothed...
Okay, let's stop there for a minute, because this is a woman that's essentially, we'd call him a single woman. She's not betrothed to a man, which means she doesn't belong to, or she's not promised to another man. See,
right.
We'll have to do another show on betrothal here.
Right.
Because it is kind of important to understand. But she hasn't been promised by her father to any man yet. There hasn't been a transaction done. This woman here, this scenario here, she's not a promise to any man yet.
Right.
By her father.
And should force her and lie with her, and be found the man that lay with her shall give to the father of the damsel 50 silver shekels, and she shall be his wife. Because he has humbled her, he shall never be able to put her away.
Okay, so a lot of times say that he raped her. I don't think this was rape. The word here is used force, but and a lot of times when we use the word force, we think of rape. He took by force something that did not belong to him, which was this woman's virginity. So this woman was a virgin who had not been promised. He enticed her, seduced her, whatever. We know what men do these days. He took her virginity. It wasn't that she was raped. It was that he took by force something that actually belonged to her father, which was her virginity.
Right. Well,
okay.
That's the thing, though. In our society, young women think because it's their bodies that it belongs to them. And I get that. I get the whole feminist kind of ownership thing. But if you're being raised and cared for by a loving father and he wants what's best for you, in the biblical standard, that would be entrusting him to help you make the right decision as to who you end up with or who you become the wife or woman to. In this situation, I could see this person, this man, being so overtaken with this woman that he tries to entice her to the point where she is so caught up with what he's doing that she just kind of gives in. And yet there was no deal between him and her father. So in essence, without the father's permission, he violated the father by overcoming his daughter.
Well, and so this is really similar to the Exodus chapter 22 passage we read earlier, because it's a virgin that has not been betrothed, and then the man sleeps with her, and of course. And then this is kind of a little bit, you get a little bit more detail on this one, that 50 shekels of silver is there to pay, and he shall not humble her, and he can't divorce her ever. Because see, today we don't even use fathers as a reason. We just take. But I know a lot of translations of the Bible, a lot of people will say, oh no, this woman was raped by this guy, and she was forced to marry a rapist. Now this is completely wrong. And if you understand it the way I'm explaining, this isn't rape. This is the woman wanted to, but didn't get permission from the father, went behind the father's back, and now the father has to do damage control at this point. This is what's going on here. This is why the man had to pay the full amount, 50 shekels of silver, and he wasn't allowed to ever divorce her. This wasn't a rape scenario that you hear a lot of people saying. This was a man didn't follow the right protocol to get his woman, to get his bride. Well, and
she didn't either because she didn't stay close to where the father was, so she wouldn't put herself in a bad, precarious position. And that does happen even today. Young women don't understand the situation they put themselves in, being around people. And you hear of other sad stories of people being taken advantage of with drinks and all sorts of things with, drugs and whatnot. But here again, it was a girl not staying in, near her father enough to where she wouldn't allow herself to be in a bad position. Because if she allowed herself to be alone with this guy, then that's what led to this. But if she didn't allow herself to be in his presence alone, then it wouldn't have happened.
But you remember the Deuteronomy passage. Remember, the one woman got stoned. It wasn't the fact that she was deceiving the man that she was given to. Mm-hmm. This was, and also she was playing a harlot in her father's house, is a reason why she got stoned for that. Mm-hmm. This woman here, she was not a virgin when she got married either, but she wasn't stoned to death.
Well, no, she just,
the man had to pay the
she
father.
She was a virgin when he took her, but when he married her, he was the one that received her virginity, so he married her.
Well, not married. He took her
as his wife.
He took her as wife. Yeah, we're so used to thinking marriage, but I've got to use my phrases.
He accepted her as his woman because
he
actually received her as a wife before she was technically his wife.
Right. So you see, it wasn't that the woman before that in the Deuteronomy passage. It wasn't a virgin when he was given his wife. She played the harlot in her father's house.
Well, the father didn't know. It was her father as well.
Must have been the father didn't know.
Right.
Because if the father knew, he didn't want her daughter getting killed right at the doorstep. So he would have negotiated a lower price for her probably.
So the deception was actually against her father as much as it was the gentleman that paid the bride.
It's interesting because the fathers had the control of the daughter's virginity.
Or even who they marry or became woman of.
Even if they could marry. You learn it in the Exodus passage that he could actually refuse. If on this scenario, Deuteronomy, if you put that one together with the Exodus 22 passage, the father of the woman could refuse to give her as a wife.
Right.
He could just say, no, you're a scumbag, and I'm not going to give you. And then, of course, she would, of course, not be a virgin at that point, so she couldn't. He would have to try to get, and that's why he went, I'll just get the amount of money from him because it's transactional.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to get the money from somebody else. It's a way different scenario than what we see today in our culture and society.
We have gotten off the course, biblical course, the godly course, so badly that it just saddens me because our society has also degraded so poorly that I see this as being one of the main reasons why we have such bad issues with sexual promiscuity, bankrupt in their relationships. And that's what's happening. Everyone wants to have a great relationship, but they don't know how to start getting involved in that in the right way because they start off on the wrong foot. It's really what's sad. We don't have fathers, necessarily, not all fathers. Some fathers are, but the majority of fathers may not be involved in encouraging and guiding their children, girls and boys, to being pure, to when they, future relationships, to not fall in the trap of being someone's one-night stand, which is really sad. But
I mean, the old days, they cared so much about it, they would put chastity belts on their daughters to protect their daughter's virginity because, hey, I can't be around all the time. So, I mean, obviously, we don't want to go down that route again, but hey, maybe we can come up with modern day chastity belts. I don't know.
No.
I mean,
it's got to be, here's how it's going to work. It's not a physical form of a chastity belt that even works. It's a chastity of the heart. It's really seeing that this is the only way to have a successful marriage, if that's a true desire of someone's heart to want to be married. The only way you're going to successfully be able to have that and give yourself to someone is to give your whole self to that person and not pieces. And I say that because, yes, my mother was raised in a conservative area. My father, not so much in the inner city. But I had a choice to make, and I could have gone either way. I had siblings that made their choices, and but I felt that was the best choice for me, and I don't regret it. I am grateful that that's the choice that I made, and the both of us have been married for 30 years.
Well, next week, we'll go into what the New Testament then teaches about this topic, especially when it comes to the parable of the 10 virgins, and that's in Matthew chapter 25, the biggest chapter that talks about how to treat virgins in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We're going to go into what the New Testament teaches about this, which is really similar, you learn, of what the Old Testament taught about it. So it really hasn't changed much. We're just getting other details about it. Of course, we all know the importance it was for Jesus to be born of a virgin.
Right.
That's actually one of the basically tenets of Christianity.
Right.
The fact that Christ was born of a virgin.
Yeah.
Again, untainted. Everything in our society is geared towards this isn't important. It is important.
Yes.
You might have failed at this in your past. What I'm trying to do is get you to teach your children to, if you made the failures, that's okay. What you want to do is you want to break that cycle and teach your children the importance of holiness, chastity, purity in everything that you do in life, including the sexual purity,
Yes.
It's just sad to see people going around having these one-night stands, hookups. There's these hookup apps now, Tinder and all these other ones that you go into. It sickens me that this is what's going on in our society today. But this is where we've come down to now. We got to reverse all this.
Well, we can change the course of our society's degradation when it comes to sexual sin and lack of purity. We can change that course if we encourage and show the importance of what God's word says purity and virginity is. And it's not a stigmatism. It's actually a badge of honor.
We live in a very dark, deceptive age, that's for sure. We must be vigilant. We must be manly. We must be fortified, standing firm in the faith, doing everything out of love, not only because it's biblical,
but because it glorifies God.
Join or contact us at satanslowseason.org. This is a non-copyrighted Living in Satan's Low Season production.